It's been about 5 years since my last casual date. Without getting into too much detail, my last relationship was we weren't right for each other. He had ridiculously traditionalistic high standards. I just wanted to bask in my oddness. He wanted marriage, family, the whole nine. That's not something I could bring myself to want so badly. I want to want those things, but right now, I can't seem to picture my life like that. So when I found myself changing who I was to fit his mold, I knew what I had to do. It was hard, but in the end, it was probably the most liberating moment of my life. Anyway, that is not what I'm trying to tell you about. What I'm trying to tell you about is what happened last night. I went on a date, my first date since my ex, and it was so much more than I had ever anticipated it would be. I met Matt through one of my good friends. He's tall and has incredible hair, and for the first time, I found myself thinking, what an impressive beard. I never thought I'd find a guy like him. Matt is hilarious, and we have so much in common. During and after dinner, we talked for hours about music and art and books, everything. We sat on a bench and watched people walk by. He made me laugh constantly with his funny observations and made up stories about the people. That guy has 7 cats and a gas mask fetish, he would lean over and say to me. It was the kind of date a girl dreams about. It was perfect in every way, and for a moment I was thinking that this couldn't be real life. It was too cliche and movie magical to actually be going this well. But it was. By the end of the date, I found myself not wanting to leave. We had been flirting and casually touching hands or arms or shoulders all night. But I have to admit, I wanted more. I wanted to feel his flesh against mine. I wanted to hear his breath, and I just... I wanted him. Had to have him. I never thought I'd be so bold as to invite him up to my apartment after only the first date. But I did. We finished off a bottle of expensive wine, left our glasses on the coffee table, and, needless to say, we were all mouth and hands and hot breath by the time I had him on my bed. He asked a few times if I wanted to stop. He's such a gentleman like that. I told him that I wanted this, needed him. He was a little surprised when I gave a little giggle and cuffed his hands to my headboard. Even more surprised when I tied his ankles to the footboard. But he was into it. I am such a lucky girl. He moved around as much as he could, intense eyes and grinning, before looking down to the sheets of plastic under him. "What are those for?" he asked. I smiled at him, opened my nightstand drawer, and pulled out a gag and pocket knife. "I get a little messy sometimes," I told him. He went to scream, but I shoved the gag into his open mouth before any sound came out, told him to be a good boy, and proceeded to straddle his waist. He squirmed under me, throwing me dirty looks, and I couldn't hear him properly because of the gag, but I think he was begging for something. I knew what he needed, though, and I knew what I needed. This night was going to be perfect. I cut his shirt off of his body and trailed the tip of the knife from the top of his cheek all the way down to his belt buckle. I wanted to feel his flesh against mine in the most intimate of ways. I trembled from anticipation and dug the knife into his side. Not too deep, but he tried to scream anyway. His eyes were so wide and pleading with me. His body was tense under me. He shook each time I dug my knife into his sides and abdomen. 12 times I dug my knife into him. 12 times I ran my fingers over his wounds, catching the streams of blood and smearing it over my mouth, tasting his very essence. He made the most intoxicating sounds when I dipped my fingers into those precious wounds. He was all grunts and gasps. I was all giggles and trembles. I'm getting ahead of myself. I won't go too much further into my date last night. There are parts of my night that are much, much more personal. I am a lady after all, and talking about such things is unacceptable. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get going now. I convinced Matt to stay the night, and he's waiting ever so patiently for me in my bedroom. I am such a lucky girl.